Hey everyone, I'm with my good friend Shaka. Really lovely to be with you. Happy that you're able to squeeze in some time to spend with me and my audience. How you doing tonight?
I'm great, man. I'm actually really excited to be here, and I'm happy we just kind of did it spontaneous. It's been impossible to navigate my calendar during the daytime the last few weeks, so this actually worked out perfectly. So I'm excited to be here and just have a great conversation. And meanwhile, I'm looking at your bookshelf and seeing what you got back there.
Well, I just received this
Oh
beautiful
wow,
book,
that's a
and
beauty.
I appreciate you sending this to me, and I'm looking
Yeah,
forward to diving in and
yeah,
talking a little
absolutely.
bit about the process
Yeah.
and the message you want to bring. Are you at home right now?
Yeah, I am. I'm in my office out here in LA, which I feel like I've lived in this chair for the last few months, but it's all good. It's all for good cause.
And how's the process been so far? I know you've had a couple of very high profile interviews. How's that all going? How are you feeling?
I mean, honestly, Jay, this feels surreal and so real all at the same time. This is my third book in 15 years.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing, it's almost been a 10-year gap since I've gone on a book tour because the ceremonious appearance of our friend, the pandemic, happened during my second book. So I didn't get a chance to go out on tour. So a lot of this feels like working a new muscle and just reminding myself of what that felt like then the first time around, which was really, interesting. It was like a kid, it was like a kid in a candy shop, all exciting, all the shiny things that come with garnering attention around your work. And it feels a little bit like that right now, except I'm just, 10 years older and a little bit grayer.
Well, let's catch up and just talk as friends at the end of an evening. Tell us a little bit about your background growing up. I know you got into some trouble, and tell me a bit about what you went through and the trauma and the imprisonment, etc. And then we'll get quickly into kind of the message you want to bring to the world
Yeah.
based on your experience and based on living through all the uh, all the trauma and all the amazing things that you've also experienced throughout your life.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I think it just adds layer to the conversation we'll have this evening. Being someone who's now on book number three, one of the things that has led me down this path is what happened with book number one,
Mm.
Righting My Wrongs, which is my memoir that really kind of takes people back into the story of who I was as a kid, growing up in the city of Detroit, honor roll student, dreams of being a doctor and an artist. And unfortunately, I just grew up in a very difficult household with high levels of physical abuse. And I ran away. And, sadly and innocently, I thought that someone would just take this kid in who had these ambitions. And unfortunately, I found myself just navigating homelessness, for a couple of weeks. And then I got seduced into the crack cocaine trade. And I use the word seduce very intentionally because a lot of times we think about kids who end up in these very adult environments. We think they just woke up one day and was like, "Hey, I want to be rebellious and I'm gonna go and get into trouble." But what happens is people kind of prey on vulnerable kids who are navigating, running away from home and things of that nature. And so I found myself in this very adult culture. My childhood friend was murdered very early on. I was beaten nearly to death. I was robbed at gunpoint. All between the ages of 13 and 14. And
Just to rewind quickly, which neighborhood in New York and in Detroit rather were you did you grow up in?
yeah, so I grew up on the east side of Detroit, in the neighborhood like Harper and Chalmers, but I moved around. My parents separated, got back together, separated, got back together. So I ended up spending, part of my youth up until I went to prison on both the east side and the west side.
And do you
Um,
have siblings as well?
Yeah, I have a ton of siblings. It's a total of eight of us now, but it was nine. It was five boys and four girls, and it's a mixture. It's step siblings, half siblings, but we just call ourselves brothers and sisters,
Yeah.
and we have a close bond. So grew up in that culture. My brothers were impacted by it. All of us all kind of had similar paths
And
of leaving.
neither your mom or dad were stabilizing forces at all?
No, my dad worked and he was in the military, and I mean he tried to be a stabilizing force, but my mother was the homemaker, so that's what we spent the most of the time with. So when I ran away, I was really running away from her and my dad just not figuring out how to navigate parenting, and it was also in an era where the interpretation of what parenting meant to these two young people with all these kids was very skewed through this old school style of like, beating kids to silence them and make them obedient, things that would get a parent arrested for sure these days.
Right.
Um, so growing up in that culture, it was tough. And when I ran away, the streets were tougher, and I got caught up in that culture and dealt with all the things. And when I was 17, I got shot multiple times, standing on the corner of my block. And about 16 months later, I got into a similar conflict. And I write about all this in my prior works. But I got into a similar conflict. And this time I actually shot and tragically caused a man's death. And, it's one of the most regrettable moments in my life. And at that time, 19-year-old kid, I went into prison to serve what was originally a 17 to 40-year prison sentence. And I ended up serving a total of 19 years, with 7 of those years being in solitary confinement. And the thing about my experience now, when people look at my life and they some people assume that it was kind of like one of those after school specials where a kid went to prison, stayed out of trouble, became a model citizen, and got out. And that wasn't the case for me. Like I went to prison, I got into more trouble. I was hurt, I was angry, I didn't want to be responsible, I didn't want to be accountable. And so I acted out and rebelled, early into my prison sentence. And it wasn't until I was in for about 8 or 9 years where I really went on this kind of deep transformational journey, which is what led me to being at this stage of my life and career now.
And were you let out earlier than expected? How did that all work? How did your leaving prison come about?
Yeah, no, in Michigan, once you've served your minimum sentence, you can go up for parole. So I ended up going up for parole 2 years past my minimum. I ended up, going up to parole 3 times. And the third time was I had 19 years in at that point. When they finally released me. So I was let out of prison on parole, and then I had to complete the requirements of parole for 2 years before my full sentence was considered like served. And so,
Mhm.
when it was all said and done, it was 21 years up under the jurisdiction of the state of Michigan.
We're going to be focusing mostly on your current book, but I know that there was a big turning point for you that I think my audience would be very interested in. While you were in prison, you got a letter from your son, if I understand correctly. Could you tell us a little bit about that? Because I think it adds color to the story.
Yeah, when I was in solitary confinement, I ended up getting a letter from my oldest son at the time. And he just wrote and told me that his mom told him while I was in prison. And she had laid out to him that I went to prison for murder. And I didn't know the context of why or what she said or how she said it. But what I did know is that I owed him a father he can be proud of. And so I made a decision at that point to really kind of take all these things I had been learning and really apply them to my life. And what it came down to, which I talk a little bit about in the new book, is that I really had to give myself an ultimatum. And the ultimatum was basically write or die. Either I write and complete a book, or I knew that I would die in prison. And the writing part was if I finished the book in 30 days, it would be a symbolic representation of the possibility that I can turn my life around. And if I didn't, then I would have definitely have died in prison. And so that declaration was a big pivotal moment for me. And it came shortly after I got that letter from my son.
Was it difficult, given the circumstances, the really tough circumstances you had in prison, to have access to a pencil and paper, a pen and paper, books. How did that situation play itself out?
Yeah, so you don't in solitaire, you don't get like a real ink pen. They give you a very flimsy thing that's kind of like the inside of an ink pen.
Hmm.
And I just had to roll that up in paper and make
Hmm.
it firm enough to so that I can write. They allot you 10 pieces of paper per month. And if you have money on your account, then you can like order paper every 2 weeks from the store. And so that's what I would do. I would just order notepads and, and or like by bartering food with my neighbors, for them to give me their 10 allotted sheets of paper or, a notepad or whatever. So, it was
Yeah.
always figuring out how to solve problems in prison. And that was when I'm getting access to tools to write. But the cool thing is that I was able to make it happen. And I have like the four books I've written in prison. I actually have all the original copies and versions here in my
That's
office in
incredible.
LA.
That's
Yeah.
incredible. I imagine that'd be valuable. I'd love to see that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and tell me the process once you got out, like what happened day one? Like tell me about your reintegration into society.
Yeah, I mean, I got out in June of 2010, one day after my 38th birthday. So I got out June 22nd, and it was like Fred Flintstone literally walking into an episode of the Jetsons. Like it was, I'm coming out of a cave-like existence into this modern technology world. And there was a mixture. There was a mixture of like anxiety of like, how do I catch up? And then there was more excitement that I got an opportunity to figure out all this new technology, all the interesting things that was happening in modern culture. And, I came home, I'd written my first, couple of books in prison. I published my first one from prison, got out, and I just started hustling those books out the trunk of my car. Like literally the first thing I did when I got out was sold a book in a parole office parking lot. And so, I've been selling books ever since then. So, it was an incredible experience, of uncertainty. There was some naivete there. I went into a lot of spaces just kind of blind. I would go to neighborhood parks and just wherever people were gathering at, I was there trying to sell books. Downtown, you name it, local bars and clubs, I would set up shop inside some of these places. I would talk to the manager and be like, hey, can I put some books on the table and sell to people coming in and out? And surprisingly,
Hmm.
people would come to the party and they would leave with a book. So, it was that kind of like the innocence of ignorance, that oh, most people wouldn't think to sell a book in a nightclub, but I was like, if I could talk my way into putting some books there,
Yeah.
why not? And
Yeah.
so yeah,
Hmm.
it was an incredible experience.
And what kind of support and acceptance did you get from friends or family? Where did you live? How did that all play out?
Yeah, when I first came out, the parole officers made me go live with my dad and my
Hmm.
mom, and I knew that wasn't going to work out. Just largely because it was like in a neighborhood where there's just too much going on. And so I had I was dating at the time a woman I had met while I was in prison who now is the mother of my child. But her and I lived together for the first year or so when I got out, and then eventually I lived on my own after I had been home for probably a couple of years or so.
And did you ever circle back to the family of the person who you shot?
Well, when you're in prison, you can't reach out to the family.
Yeah, yeah.
And it wasn't until years later when I started getting some visible success where I was able to actually reach out to the wife, and we've had a kind of, up and down relationship dynamic, where, initially she forgave me, then she didn't, then they sued me. And I've maintained like my emotional equilibrium throughout it all because I understand that they, are likely still hurt. Like the pain of losing a loved one isn't something that comes and goes. So I've had a lot of compassion and empathy, and whenever she called, I take her call and I would talk to her, and even when we went through the lawsuit and there were people that were supporters of their family that were just kind of aggressively, saying a lot of things online. I took it all for what it was. It's the hurt people, and this family was really hurting, and so I understood where they were coming from. But now I've kind of got to this space in my life where you know I can't do the back and forth. Like I'm not obligated to do the back and forth. It's I served the sentence that I was given, and my work speaks for itself in the world at this point. Like I don't need to justify any of the things that I do in the world at this point. And I'll always have empathy and compassion,
Mhm.
but it doesn't mean that I have to stay on the kind of up and down roller coaster that comes with that.
Understand. Tell me about the creative process. Tell me about the uh, the progression and the evolution from the first book to the second to the third.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm always excited to talk about the creative process. Sometimes that part of my story gets lost
Hmm.
in my actual life story,
Hmm.
which, I understand why, but nevertheless, it's not always the dynamic that I appreciate. I appreciate now
Mm.
more the creative part of my life, and some of it is just like, as you get older, you think about the magic of being able to even create anything, whether it's writing, visual art, music, and I love all type of artists. Everything from, I watch videos with interior designers and people who specialize in transforming cars. Like my brain is very wired to like appreciate the kind of story of how people create what they create. So I love the backstory. I love the
Yeah, me
stories of
too.
like what happened in the studio. And I watch a lot of old footage of, artists that I admire and appreciate. And for me, my backstory with being a writer, you know, when I think back, I was like, I've always had like a creative gene. I used to be a pretty good visual artist when I was a kid. At one point, I wanted to be a rapper, so I always was pretty good with like rhyming and poetry. But I didn't take writing serious until I was in solitary confinement, and I decided to write a novel, which is what I really enjoy writing. I mean, I enjoy all of my writings, but novels, you can really get lost in that world, and I love that. I love that I can kind of create these worlds that allow these characters to become whoever they're meant to be. And so I ended up writing four novels before I got out of prison.
Wow.
And then I also wrote a poetry book and a children's book. I kind of co-wrote and edited a children's book, and then kind of like a cautionary, workbook for young people who were considering street life. So, that process was tedious. It was like literally hand. My first four books I wrote by hand, and then I had
And it
to.
wasn't even easy to get a hold of proper tools to actually write in the
Yeah,
first place.
yeah.
Did
It
you
wasn't even like a real ink pen. It was tough. Like it was some
did
old.
you ever have these just people who just want to just don't want good for you that would rip up the papers, or did you ever have anything like really bad like that happen after
No, I
doing
was
a whole
really.
big body of work?
Yeah, no, I was really fortunate. I was always afraid that one day one of the officers might come in and trash my
Yeah,
writing.
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
But I was really fortunate. I didn't have that problem.
Good.
I think there was a level of respect there that I kind of was able to navigate. But
Mhm.
yeah, that I wrote those books, by hand, and then I transferred them to typed out document via a Brother 500 word processor, which I saved up to buy. And it was so wild because you could only see like one line of text as you're typing. And I would literally like type up these 300-page books. Then I would have to redo it because you can only print out 13 pages. So I would type them up and then I would like correct them and go back in and figure it all out. But it was incredible, like to really look back and think about, man, like I was so determined. I was like, I would write literally all day, and I would go and do my job and come back from my job, and I worked in the library. I worked in both the general and the law library, and so whenever I had downtime, I would just write, and then I would write in my cell late at night, into the wee hours of the morning, and so
What kind
that's
of light did you have at night?
so at night they cut the power off in the cell, so you don't have any in cell light.
Yeah.
You only get the little bit of light that kind of bleeds through the window, the little cracks in the window. So it wasn't a lot. It's a funny thing, like whenever you're in LA, I'll show you my original manuscripts, and you'll notice that sometimes my writing is very vertical,
Uh-huh.
just very straight up and down, and
Uh-huh.
then other times it's slanted.
It
And the
depends
reason
on where the
is
light is.
yeah, so it's slanted because I would have to stand by the door and
Wow.
just kind of turn the notebook so I can actually see. And the
I
only
can
way I
see.
can do that was like to write slanted.
Huh.
And so anytime you see the vertical, that means I was writing when I actually had optimum light. And anytime it's slanted, I was working with the light that I had coming bleeding in from the hallway. And so
That's unreal. Wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
and now I have the wonderful, amazing world of technology at my disposal, and
Yeah.
I write a little bit different. I use like my notes app on iPhone.
Oh yeah.
I write a lot of ideas down there. There's something about having a document that's non-committal that makes it easy for me. I think I picked that up from reading about August Wilson. He
Mm.
said he would write on these napkins and things that he knew he can throw away if he wanted to, and it took all the pressure off him to create anything. So
Mm.
uh, I don't know if I've subconsciously kind of like adapted that practice, but writing in my notes is just a great way to keep all of my kind of ideas in one space, and I can do it in real time, no matter where I'm at. And then I'll take it from there, and I started kind of translate it to like pages or a Word Google Doc. Word is the last thing that I use, which is usually after I get into my editor, because it seems like that's all these people use is Word.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I think because I've had MacBooks longer than I've ever had a laptop. Pages is I'm more into it. That's more of my connecting point.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But I write a lot on planes. I write usually when the house settles down and the kid is asleep and my wife is asleep. I'll come out to my office and close this door. It gets a little cool at night in LA, so during the winter months, I definitely come in my office, close the door, throw some music on, and I just kind of zone out. And then
And do you type first or do you write first?
I type first.
Yeah.
Every now and then, I don't write by hand as much. I still write my journals by hand.
Yeah. Yeah. Me too.
Um, but I don't write creatively by hand
Mm.
as much unless it's like poetry or something short.
Hmm.
I can just write, I can type way faster than I can write by hand.
Hmm.
So that keeps my brain just moving quickly. So a lot of times it's translating from my notes to a document and then kind of going from there.
Got it.
But I love it. I'm a big music person. So when I'm traveling, I try to always get a window seat so I can actually write. I throw my headphones on. Sometimes I'll have a glass of wine or a cocktail, and then I just kind of get into my flow. And part of it is like I romanticize what it means to be a writer. I wanted to be like in a smoking jacket with a smoking pipe on a train, somewhere, going across the countryside. But instead I end up on planes, which is like super cool as well. Because there's a thing that I think happens in my brain where when I'm flying and I'm looking out the window at just the clouds and the majesty of the sky and like it really grounds me in understanding how small we are and how limited our time is
Hmm.
and how special it is to get a chance to do anything that we wake up and dream about or think of. And so that's kind of the creative process, a lot of music.
Yeah. Yeah. What
Um,
kind of
there-
music do you like?
so it depends on which stage of the writing I'm in.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So in the ideation stage, when I'm first kind of like working out the stories, there's a lot of rock and roll, a lot of Pink Floyd, Aerosmith, a lot of Led Zeppelin, a lot of, Black Sabbath. And then there's a lot of like hardcore Wu-Tang, like very cinematic music, so it's like Wu-Tang and Pink Floyd, like that might all be on one playlist, and Led
I
Zeppelin
love
and
that.
You
You got to
know,
meet my buddy Scott Page. He lives in LA. He was the
yeah,
saxophonist for Pink Floyd.
wow. Oh man,
Yeah,
I would love
yeah.
to meet him
You
and
know
tell
the
him.
song Money, he does
Yeah,
that minute long saxophone solo. It's just
wow.
cool. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes,
He's a good dude. He's a
unbelievable.
good dude. We'll introduce you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I would love that. Yeah, because all of that music, what I get from that music is it's very cinematic.
Yeah.
You know, it's all the details are very cinematic. So there's something about writing with
Mm,
that cinema, and
mm,
I love a great guitar solo, and so being able to listen to those guys, and and then there's a lot of like some of the more contemporary, artists. I'll throw some Nirvana in there,
mm, mhm.
a little bit of Nine Inch Nails. You just never know where it's going with me, but
Uh,
usually mostly rock, Aerosmith.
cool.
And then once I get through that stage, it's like it's more. It can be. Oh yeah, along with that first stage is also a lot of like funk, a lot of Curtis Mayfield, and
Uh-huh.
a lot of soul, a lot of that. Isaac Hayes,
Love
just
that.
all that
Yeah.
cinematic music. And then the next phase, like once I feel like I'm in a zone, like I got something going, then it's straight hip hop. But it's like it's pure hip hop. It's the best lyricist. So it's Rakim and
Mm.
Mos Def and Nas and and all these guys that are just like pure
Yeah, yeah,
lyricists.
yeah.
And then when I start getting into that kind of I'm almost done, it switches into more kind of hustler hip
Mm,
hop. So
mm.
the Jay-Z's and the aspirational, the Rick Rosses, that type of music that's kind of like hey, I'm out here to win the day. So
Yeah, yeah.
that's the kind of journey. When I'm editing, now I'm into a softer space. It's like jazz, Coltrane, and Miles, and Thelonious Monk, and some Sade, and a little smoother R&B. So I go through these real, it's all these kind of movements with music and the writing, and it's funny because like when I'm like reading it back rhythmically, I can tell I'm like really like music is really playing with the words, right? So,
Yeah.
I'm a very rhythmic writer, I'm a very poetic writer, and all of that is really just the kind of integration of that music in my DNA in that way. And so, and then I'll host events with people and talk through and do some readings of the pieces and see how it's landing.
That's great. No, I can relate, given my love of music as well. You're pretty diverse. It's awesome. So tell me about the evolution from one book to the next, till to the one at hand.
Yeah, it's been such an incredible evolution. Righting My Wrongs that's my memoir. And
Hmm.
the interesting thing, how that book came about was I was out selling my novels
Mm,
and I would do these talks and people would say, you don't sound like someone who's been in prison. And I
mm,
would always say, like, what does that mean?
hmm.
And they would just say, you just don't sound like you've been in prison. And I know they meant it as a compliment, but it was just really pricking something inside of me. And I was like, I met some of the most brilliant minds in prison, some
Mm,
great philosophers and great writers and creators. And so I was like, I need to write so people will understand the backstory of how someone could end up in prison whose life didn't seem like it was going in that direction. And when I wrote that book, I originally self-published, hustled it, and then one of the copies reached Oprah, and she reached out and we did an interview, and next thing you know, I had an incredible book deal, and the book was all over the world.
mm.
And so it's been such an incredible gift. I mean, that book still sells to this day. I get people that reach out all the time that's like either just discovering it or rediscovering it. I haven't read it myself in a long time.
Yeah.
Um,
And
and
how did it get to Oprah? Just briefly, if you could tell us that, I'm sure the
yeah,
audience would be very intrigued.
yeah, I actually write about it in a new book, so I
Yeah.
don't want to give too many spoilers.
Okay. Okay,
But
cool.
I'll give this one spoiler.
Yeah.
How it actually got to Oprah, I was invited to speak at an event, and there was a list of incredible people at that event, and so I gave away 100 copies to go into their swag bag.
Mm,
And one woman in that at that event, after I got done speaking, she went back and she read the book, and she was the woman who took the book to Oprah. Unbeknownst to me,
mm,
she like was the like a former president or something of Harpo's, I think she was
Very
the
cool.
former president. She's a dear friend,
Wow.
Andrea Wisham. She's an incredible friend of mine now. But she got the book, she read it, and she took it to Oprah, and then Oprah refused to read it. And I'll let the audience figure out what happens when they read the new one.
Okay, sounds good.
But that's how she got it, and you know she's went on to say multiple times it's one of her favorite books, one of her favorite
Amazing.
memoirs, and you know our conversation was one of the best ones she had. So that was Righting My Wrongs. You know, after Righting My Wrongs, I was undecided on what I wanted to write next. I really wanted to go back to my fiction. But there was so much happening in the world and in my life as a dad that I felt inspired to write the second book, which is called Letters to the Sons of Society.
Hmm.
And you know, it is some of the deepest writing I think I've ever done. And it's some of the most beautiful writing that I've ever done. It didn't get the fanfare that Righting My Wrongs did. And I don't know if it was the sophomore jinx or if it was just the global pandemic that didn't really allow for me to really get out and talk the book up. But it is so beautifully written, so personal and intimate. And that book came about because I have a adult child, a adult son, and a teenage son now. And I wanted to impart these life lessons on all these young men that I encountered throughout life. And what I realized is that all the men that I mentored, that I've worked with over the years, they all kind of exist between my two sons. And so that's how that book came to be. And it ended up, you know, being you know, again, another one of those books that's been adopted by many. You know, I get people that reach out all the time that's just discovering that book. But that one was very personal, very intimate, as, you know, as was Righting My Wrongs. And then after that book came out, I was like, man, I don't know if I'll write another work of fiction again.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I ended up what ended up happening is I started toying with this big idea that I had. And the idea was that people that I was encountering did not realize that they had these hidden prisons that they existed inside, these kind of limiting beliefs, this kind of doomsday and nothing can go wrong and go right in their life. And, or, you know, they over indexed on work and entrepreneurship. And because we live in a culture that can kind of celebrate grind until you pass out, they would kind of hide behind their accomplishments instead of addressing the thing that was really driving them. You know, the broken relationship with a dad, a failed, you know, marriage, a child who was navigating addiction, suicidal ideation, like you name it, people come up to me and talk to me about it. And at one point, it was blowing my mind that so many people would just open up with such a high level of vulnerability. And a lot of them would say, like, I've never shared this with anybody in my life. And like I was so honored and taken aback by it all at one time. You know, it forced me to really sit with myself and ask the question of like, what is my purpose? Like, what was my purpose when I was sitting in that cell?
Hmm.
And what have I been called in the world to do? And I realized that I've been called into the world to help people get free and for them to unearth these hidden prisons like grief, anger, shame, and really get beneath the surface of what those things are. And, you know, the stories in the book are, you know, they're incredibly rich, real lived experiences. And so it's a little different than the standard kind of self-help book
Hmm.
or, you know, professional development or business development in the sense that I draw heavily from my real life.
Hmm.
You know, I'm not telling somebody to go out and manifest a dream for themselves without having first done it. You
Hmm.
know, I'm not telling people that, listen, when times are tough, you can overcome it if you know, kind of put together a strategy with some of these tactics and lessons if I haven't done it myself. So, you know, everything that I talk about in the book, there's a reflection of how I've done it in my own life.
Is
You know,
it possible to be more imprisoned in a sense on the outside than someone who's imprisoned on the inside?
absolutely, because the thing that's super clear on the inside is that you're actually inside of a prison cell.
Hmm.
What's not always clear on the outside is that you're imprisoned by the cell in your mind.
Hmm.
And it's easy to hide it, right? It's easy. For example, there are some well-intended prisons that don't on the outset don't look like they're harmful.
Hmm.
Like a helicopter parent. Really it just seems like, oh, this is just a parent that cares a little bit too much, right?
Yeah.
In reality, the reason that helicopter parents exist is because some fear that probably occurred in their childhood has forced them to project that onto their own child. And so now here they are. The child can't develop their own skill sets, don't learn how to be resilient, doesn't have to solve problems because they got this helicopter parent that's always fixing and solving for them.
Hmm.
And, on the outside looking in, it's like, oh, this is just a parent that loves their kid. But the truth is, this is a parent that is hiding, um, you know, their true self. And they're imposing that self onto a kid in a way that's unhealthy. And then there's the other ones that are like, you're dating someone, it doesn't work out, and you decide, well, we didn't work as lovers, we should just be friends. We know how that story goes. It's like friends 1 week, lovers 1 week, friends, lovers, friends, and then you're never really free to actually pursue the love that you say that you want because subconsciously you're probably hoping that something will change. And so we do these kind of things to ourselves. Some of them are self-imposed, and then some of them are more complex. Grief, no one's going to get through this life without grief. But what you can do is you can develop skill sets to help you navigate it in management so that you're not paralyzed by grief and you're not trapped into somberness and sadness in a way that doesn't allow you to show up for the people in your life. So, that's kind of what I've witnessed is that some of these things they're harder to get out because they're harder to see.
And how does one escape these hidden prisons?
So there's a variety of tools that I provide for people, throughout the book. A couple of them are, they're kind of well known, but it's my approach to them, right? So, for example, I don't just talk about journaling as a kind of set it and forget it thing. Like, it sounds cool that you can just write down your dream and manifest it. But anybody who's ever achieved at a high level who have manifested a dream, they know that there's more steps than just writing it down. There's taking these kind of active, approaches to how do I get out of life what I desire? I can journal about, hey, I really want to lose that 10 pounds, but then at some point I got to go get on the treadmill. I got to change my eating habits. I got to, whatever that thing is, right? I smoked cigars like for years. And, in my mind, I'm like, I want to be healthy and I want to stop smoking cigars, but I'll still would go and buy cigars. So at some point after I wrote it down and got real with myself,
Hmm.
I was like, okay, well, what do you have to do? What is the step you have to do to manifest this health related to cigar smoking so that you're not coughing and hacking and all the things? And so the action step was one, you have to throw away the ones that you currently have,
Yeah.
get rid of any paraphernalia that's associated with it and don't go to the gas station to buy more. So,
Yeah.
it's like these are real action steps that coincide with the manifestation. But when you get to the more, the bigger stuff, the aspirational, hey, I want a new home. I will go so far as to go and do these, open houses. I go and look at, okay, what kind of house do I want to be in? What does that feel like energetically? How do I, you know, take this energy into my being so that I'm drawing that energy to me.
Hmm.
So everything for me is about activation, and then other practices are meditation and gratitude, practices and mindfulness and friendship is a great tool, right? How do you spend time like
Hmm.
intentional time, not just kind of hey, let's go out and watch the game and throw back a bunch of beers and shots. But like, how do you create intimacy within friendships that allows you to receive the things that you really need to sustain and to get where you're trying to go in life? So the book covers tons of them. There's the dig deeper section where it allows you to go deeper into the ideas, and then there's the kind of unlocks, the keys that, if you apply this to your life, and realize you may have to go back multiple times to get it right.
Clearly, you think a lot about parenthood, from early days to the book you wrote, Letters to the Sons of Society. You mentioned helicopter parenting as an example of a potential cause of hidden prisons. What does parenthood mean to you? Tell me a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, parenthood to me, man, is like really the it's the greatest gift of an opportunity
Hmm.
to influence, impact, and shape a young life
Yeah.
to have greater and broader impact on the world in a positive way. There's no greater, responsibility than a young life in the hands of an adult, whether it's your child, whether it's, I feel the same way as a mentor. I feel the same way as an uncle to my nephews and nieces.
Hmm.
I really believe that when children are in my presence, that these are my children.
Hmm.
That there's not just hey, this is my son's friends. Like, no, these children, they're in my
Hmm.
household. They're
Hmm.
my children. And I got a responsibility as a dad to impart, wisdom and lessons and boundaries and structure, so that they know when they come, they can have fun and they can be kids, but they also have to be respectful and mindful and say thank you and be courteous and you know, and if there's things that they're struggling with to figure out, as long as it's age appropriate and parentally approved, we can have discussions and that are meaningful for them at their age. So that responsibility, and it's not a biological, responsibility. It's a lived wisdom responsibility. All
Hmm.
of us are, once you become the age of an adult, to me, you're parenting when children are under your care in any regard.
Yeah, I
But
agree.
it's the greatest joy. I love it. I love being a dad. I'm in an interesting phase. My youngest son is 13 now, and he's getting his voice is getting deeper, and he's getting more testosterone, and so I'm like, man, let me take advantage of the times he still wants to cuddle, and he'll lean on my shoulder, especially when we're traveling. He literally like always goes to sleep on my shoulder. So I'm like, all right, let me just appreciate this
There's
for
no greater gift. There's no
yeah,
greater gift. Well, I'll
yeah.
tell you what, my son is 22 now, and I still cuddle with him.
I love it. I love it. It's such a gift. It's such a
Yeah,
gift to
it's
both
beautiful.
parent and child.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah,
I
I'm
gotta
loving.
send you, if you haven't seen it, I did a song for my son when he turned 13. In our culture, you're technically a man when you turn 13. It's called Boys Become a Man.
Yeah, I would love to hear
It's
that.
got a rap in it, and it's a bit
Yeah,
of a hip hop kind of ballad.
I love it. I
But
love it.
yeah, I mean, to me, there's no greater privilege in the world than to
Yeah.
be a parent.
No, that's the
Yeah,
greatest. It's the
yeah,
greatest.
yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. Anything else you might want to add or share with the audience? I appreciate you taking the time this late at night. We had the spontaneous call, and it's really been beautiful, and I'm here to support you in every way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I'm super excited about how to be free. I really think it's going to help a lot of people. This book has been endorsed by everybody from Joe Rogan to Oprah Winfrey. I call it from Joe to O. And I'm like, the world exists between those kind of worlds in terms of how we think about life. What I really love about the book is that it's really accessible
Hmm. Hmm.
to people across race, gender. No, there's no elements where it's like, oh, this isn't for me. This is absolutely for you. This is the most human-centered book possible. And I'm excited about it. I want to have fun. I talk about joy in the book. I talk about love. I talk about um, what does it mean to feel unstoppable and success and like, so it's really that part of the book like really excites me and fires me up. I'm going out on book tour like next week, so I can't wait to see people in person, and hopefully I'll see some of your listeners, at some of
Amazing.
these stops on the tour. So,
Yeah,
and,
looking
and then I'm
forward to
just
it.
I'm just thankful. Thank you so much for opening up, to your audience. I know it's probably tired and late in your world, but it's been a great joy to just have a candid, random conversation. I
Yeah, I
really think
loved
this
it.
is how I wish this was how like podcasting went, where you could just pop on a screen and be like, all right, let's have a really good conversation
Yeah,
with
let's just
anybody,
wrap.
you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. Listen, we'll talk soon and we'll get you up here in Canada hopefully one of these days as well. And
Yeah.
looking forward to helping to facilitate some events in the United States and anywhere else around the world with pleasure.
Yeah, I would truly be honored, and I'm looking forward to it.
All right, man. Talk
All right,
soon.
talk soon, bro.
Take care, my dear friend.
All right.
Take care.
All
Bye-bye.
right. All right, peace.